Good morning, everybody. My name is Simon Hamilton. I'm the Chief Executive at Belfast Chamber, and you're all very welcome to this morning's event. This is the final, the fourth and final in our Re-Energizing Belfast series, which is delivered in partnership with Carson McDowell. The title of today's event is Energized Cities, and as many of you will know, over the series, we've been looking at how Belfast can bounce back from the pandemic and continue on its regeneration journey. At Belfast Chamber, we're always very keen to learn from other cities and hear their stories and see what lessons we can learn and implement here in our own city. We're delighted that we are going to be joined today by two leaders from two great cities in Europe. Later on, we'll hear from Anne Skovbro, who is the Chief Executive at Copenhagen's City and Port Authority, and also from Tom Reardon, who is Chief Executive of Leeds City Council. As I mentioned, this series wouldn't have been possible if it hadn't been for the support of Carson McDowell, one of Belfast's leading law firms. And we're delighted that we're joined this morning by Chris Phillips. Chris is a real estate partner at Carson McDowell. And I'm just going to hand over to Chris to say a brief word of welcome on behalf of Carson McDowell. Chris.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this final seminar in the series. It's a series which we've been privileged to support Belfast Chamber, and if you have watched the previous three seminars, you'll have seen some fantastic contributions from a number of parties looking at where Belfast is now and where we're looking to head in the future. As Simon says, today's seminar is a bit different. We're looking at a couple of cities further afield and a couple of success stories in Leeds and Copenhagen. So it'll be very interesting to hear what Tom and Anne have to say. I'm sure you're looking forward to it as well. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chris. So we're going to go to our first contributor today. And this sort of, there's no green lists or amber lists here today. We're going to a journey around Northern Europe. So I want to introduce Tom Reardon. Tom, as I mentioned, is the Chief Executive at Leeds City Council. Some of you may be familiar with Tom. He has appeared in some events that alongside Suzanne Wiley and others at Belfast City Council in the past, when we've been looking at, for example, the Deloitte crane study, something that we touched on in one of our previous events in this series. Leeds is not that far away, not as far away as Copenhagen, a lot of similarities to Belfast, and we explore some of those with Tom later. But it is probably arguably a little bit ahead of Belfast in its regeneration journey. So keen to learn from Tom and what has been happening in Leeds. Tom, the way we're going to structure this today, Tom is going to talk now. We can put a few questions to him afterwards. Please use the Q&A function if anything Tom has said sparks any interest, you've got a question for him, and we'll try to put those to him. Tom then has to go around about 30:30. We'll let him do that before we then move on to Anne. So if you've got a question for Tom, please ask it now, and we'll ask it, pose it now, and we'll ask it to him before he goes. So Tom, over to you. Very welcome. Great to have you here with us this morning. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry. Yeah. Thanks, Simon. It's a real privilege to be here, and particularly with such a great city as Belfast, and also with Anne as well. We were just discussing before the webinar what a fantastic city Copenhagen is, and Belfast as well. I've visited both with my family recently, and they rank among our top destinations. So it's great to be here. The Leeds story is one that I'll tell over about a 10-year period that I've been chief exec there at the council, and we have we've really tried hard to regenerate and improve our city. The first thing I would say that we've done is, I think, set a clear ambition, which was really very ambitious to be the best city in the UK. It sort of immediately begs the question, does that mean you want to be better than London? And it probably does. And we were very clear that we didn't want to be, we would never be bigger than London. We would never be better in some respects, but as an all-round city, looking at our three main sort of strategies of achieving net zero and carbon reduction, reducing our health inequalities and achieving inclusive growth, we felt that we did have a chance to improve and to do more. We love being close to London, but not too close. A bit like your family. It's great to be great to be near the world financial capital, but equally good to be our own city and be clear that we wanted to be Leeds, authentically, a strong northern city with quite what I would call a Northern European vision for the city. So not build it high, build it dense at any cost, but definitely one that we would aspire to places like Copenhagen, who've shown how you can strike a better balance between economy, environment, and the social progress that you want to make. The second thing I would say is that it was very important to set out a clear set of priorities. In cities like ours, all of ours, we get bombarded with a huge number of different things to do, and they're all important for people. That great list of public services that you've got to provide, and as a public authority, unlike businesses who naturally gravitate towards their consumers, and we'll obviously try and maximize that, but have an element of choice about who they would like to target. In a city, you've got to be there for everybody, however complex their needs, however difficult their challenges, and often you're the only one who can be there for them. So that very community-based, people-based vision has been always really clear for us in Leeds, but it also demanded that in regeneration terms that we set some priorities. And I actually pinched this from Sir Bob Kerslake, a great regeneration expert who did some brilliant work in Sheffield in the 90s, whereby we set a clear set of regeneration priorities. We called them, pinching Bob's term, the Magnificent Seven, and we decided that we were going to have a new music arena, 2 new shopping centres, and then 4 other projects that were going to be in the sort of northeast southwest of the city, so that we regenerated our city centre, improved it, but also didn't just try and go for growth in a shiny city centre that sort of gentrified that and forgot about the people it was trying to help in some of the most deprived communities in the city. So what that allowed us to do was to be really clear when people came back to me at times and said, we've got a problem with this project, it's not quite going to work, nicely sending them away to say it's going to happen. Just find a solution, find a way around it. And you do get those 2 steps forward, 1 step back at times. I think that you've got to just stick with things. The music arena is now one of the top 20 in Europe. It was so good that Bruce Springsteen asked to open it. And with the genius of local government, we gave him a parking ticket. So there are sometimes things that challenge you. Our retail sector, despite the challenges, has settled and is really well established now, with Victoria Gate and John Lewis that's staying open, and our Trinity Centre, which is massively popular. And then other developments that I could go on if we had more time, but I won't. I'll maybe just focus more on the things that you might be interested in terms of the lessons. The third thing I would say is that the partnership and the collaboration and the team leads effort and culture was probably the critical factor in our success. So we're a very, very collaborative city. We do everything with others. Every single thing that we've achieved has been because of others and with other people. And we've tried to introduce what if you were reading a book, it would be called a restorative way of working in the city for public services, which is trying to do things with people rather than to them in a patriarchal way or to them or for them in a way that traditionally has been done. So we've also worked very, very collaboratively with our tech sector. We've got a fantastic emerging tech sector. I know Belfast and Copenhagen have those as well. We've we've now got a tech sector that's incredibly strong, it's growing, and it's versatile as well, which is really interesting. The Leeds economy has not been traditionally based on one sector, or we haven't had large amounts of public subsidy over the years. So we've always been quite self-starting and entrepreneurial. Marks and Spencer's was started in Leeds Market by Joseph Marks, and who was an Eastern European migrant, and Thomas Spencer, who was a Yorkshire farmer. And all the best things that happen in Leeds have generally happened where somebody from the city has worked with somebody from outside the city and made something happen. And we've tried to keep that sense of being a really strong community-based, independent-minded city, but also reached out and been more outward-looking during this period. So we've worked with a group of cities and at MIT in Boston to chart our economy and see how we can improve that with that sort of strong tech base. So we've worked with Oslo, Sydney, Monterey, Kentucky, and others across the world over the last few years to do that, and that's led to a brilliant entrepreneurship program that's bringing real diversity into our entrepreneurs. We tended to be a bit male, pale, and stale, like me. And if you had a panel of people from Leeds today from any of our sectors, they'd be much more reflective of the city that we serve, which is what you want, you know, really real diversity, a real sort of centre for migration into the UK, which is still thriving and still doing really well despite, you know, the last few years, and adding to our economies. So yeah, that was really important. And then we also had a real focus on, you know, the final thing I would say is just this real laser-like focus on not just the buildings, but the people within them. So really working hard with our universities. We've got 5 universities in the city and 9 in the wider region. And so they've been absolutely at the heart of what we're trying to do. We've got an innovation district and developed some fantastic projects that are very business facing with the education sector in the city, and you know, got a skills plan behind our economic plan, and also being somewhere where you know, we've focused on things like child obesity, young children, and we've now become, with Amsterdam, one of 2 places who've managed to reverse child obesity levels in the city. So that social you know, vision is really important. And the last thing I'll say is that translates into action as well. So children have a real voice in what we do in the city. We don't just have a Lord Mayor with the hat and the gown and the red gown. We have a children's Lord Mayor, a children's mayor with a mini me version of the Lord Mayor. And every year our schools have a competition to put forward a manifesto, and the kids in the city vote on that, and then we elect our children's mayor for a year. And we have a full meeting of all the politicians, and the children's mayor gets a standing ovation. And they come up with the amazing ideas. Kindness costs nothing. Let's stop bullying in Leeds was one year, and we had the triathletes, the Brownlee brothers, helping us with that. We got the Tour de France to come to Leeds, and we had a better cycling one, anti-racism. So yeah, having that vision that is all encompassing and where everyone feels they can be part of it is really, really vital too. So if I maybe leave it there, Simon, and then I'm really happy to answer questions and maybe use the remaining time to you know, bring that to life a little bit from your perspective, hopefully.
Super, Tom. That's great. And you know, again, a great advert for the city as well. And lots of people in the UK looking to staycation over the next number of months. So if anybody hasn't made any plans, Leeds sounds like exactly the sort of place that people might be interested in going to. Inclusion and social values is something that you highlighted and stressed, and you know, again, similarly, you know, Belfast has been struggling as it has grown to make sure that growth is extended and includes everybody. So that's a big, obviously very, very clear, very important thing, driven, I suppose, by the politics of the city, but clearly an economic benefit in that, and it makes sense to do that for the city to grow to max, because you highlighted this, well, you're not London. You would say, thankfully, you're not London in many respects, but there's a lot of competition in that northern powerhouse area for investment, and so inclusion isn't just the right thing to do. It's obviously economically wise to do it as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I also think we I think in regeneration terms, it's actually one of the challenges with cities, I think, in the last 2 decades was that working with the business community, you tended to have a lot of people who actually commuted in and out of the city, taking the big decisions about the city, whereas actually, and in some ways that sort of impact on the actual communities who live there, particularly those in the post-industrial areas that maybe, don't have the opportunities that others would have, that becomes a bit of a problem. So we try to, put that right. And I think in regeneration terms, there are often communities close to some of the regeneration that's been done. And so we've worked with, we're thankful that Leeds United have finally got back in the Premiership, and we haven't quite got the crowds in yet, but there's a coach who very much reflects the city as well, very independent minded and obsessive and passionate, and entertaining as well, I would say. So we're working with Leeds United to return their training ground to the community where it used to be, to the city centre, near the city centre, and helping the kids who can't travel out to the one that is there at the moment, for example. The other thing I would say about Northern Powerhouses, we also have realised the power of collaboration at that level. So we work really closely with Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield, Newcastle, and others, and also our neighbouring cities like Bradford, to show that we are more than the sum of the parts, and actually hunting as a pack sometimes is really important when you go into the global arena, because we're just that blob at the top of the north of this very small country to a lot of people around the world, and it's so that strength in numbers is quite important as well.
And before I leave the inclusion theme, Sarah McCarthy has asked a question about the other end of the age scale. So you mentioned children's mare, and really interesting project, intergenerational, age-friendly projects. Has that been something that has been done in Leeds, and particularly you mentioned connecting communities, and that's again something that Belfast has struggled with. The city centre almost sits as a separate island, with a lot of those neighbouring communities having people of all generations, but particularly older people who maybe don't see the city centre as their place to go. Have you done anything in that front?
Yeah, we have, and I think the intergenerational stuff is really important. And actually, the pandemic has brought that to some opportunities with that, with befriending for younger and older people via technology that we've done. And we have the best way I can describe because we want to be a great city to grow old in as well, and asking those really simple questions of what's it like to grow old in Leeds and how can we make it better is something that we try and do a lot, in terms of you tend to get focused on processes and little projects sometimes, and actually we've got to keep that outcome in our heads. And so we've put in place and funded on long-term contracts, 5-year contracts, older people's charities in the city that can help people continue their careers, but also volunteer and make sure that people can live independently in their homes longer. And I think, as the labour market gets tighter in the next few years, I think this, thinking about those older people who might want to work a bit longer, but not full time, thinking about returners to work, is really, really important.
Can I ask you about, it's called big projects. So Leeds has had a few, you mentioned the arena, and I'll come back to that in a second, but there's Channel 4 has moved into the city. HS2 is scheduled to at some stage down the line. So you've got these kind of quite large projects, which in and of themselves must be a driver of innovation, as well as a kind of a bit of a status symbol for the city. And you mentioned you didn't want to kind of go high rise, which I'm sure it wasn't a dig at Manchester, which is probably more characterised, but I know you're probably keener to have a dig at their football teams. But yeah, the importance of those big projects to drive the sort of regeneration, to establish Leeds as a city of scale, as somewhere that is serious about the future? How key have they been?
Yeah, no, I mean, I like we were talking before about before the call about how we all get put into these league tables and pitched against each other, and we are genuinely collaborative. And what Manchester have done is fantastic. It's a great city, and they've really regenerated strongly. And Howard Bernstein and Richard Leese and now Joanne Roney have done a great job. So we really value that, and we have built high buildings ourselves. I think our vision is just a little bit different because it just reflects the city that Leeds is. It's a more compact city centre. It's got more green space closer to the city centre and in the city itself, and so we're playing to those strengths. But yeah, we want to double the size of that city centre through the HS2 station, and I think having that overall vision for the city has been important in attracting. We've been very successful in the last few years, which comes on the back of getting a reputation for delivery, I think, and people buying into your overall vision that I described. And then you don't have to work quite as hard to get the people to come in. And once you've got a Channel 4 and a Sky and a Burberry, which we did, we now have got the next wave of the Bank of England. I'm about to go onto a call with a lot of government departments who are coming to the city. We've got the tech sector is growing really, really fast, and we've got 3 new very high growth Indian companies into the city. So I think, but all of them, if I was to go back to the pitch moments within those people coming to the city, the things that they latch onto most, obviously they're bothered about the financial position, they're bothered about which building they're going to be in, they're really interested in the talent and skills pipeline. But actually the things that really latch them in are the stories about the children's mayor, the child obesity issues, that community-based vision. And so, I think it is about being yourself. It's a bit like as a leader, you get asked, what should you be as a leader? And I always say to people, just be yourself, be authentic. And I think cities have got to be authentic too. And that's what gets people in the team excited, because it's about what they really believe in and they're passionate about.
I think that's an excellent point about being yourself, being authentic, playing up to your uniqueness. And can I just go back to the point around the arena and Channel 4 and the Northern Ballet as well? There's a question from Les Hume, who works in the music industry, elected yesterday as one of our junior vice presidents at Belfast Chamber. And he's asking about that music and entertainment and culture. Is that part of that uniqueness, part of that identity that you're trying to firmly establish with some of these big projects and other work as well?
Without a doubt, that's a great point, because actually I would say culture is the DNA of the city, of your city, whoever you are, and it's what makes you different. Those institutions, the bands that have come out of the city, the artists, the musicians, and that cultural core to what we're doing. And actually, Suzanne, your brilliant chief exec in Belfast, and I worked together. We were opponents in the 2023 Capital of Culture bid, and of course we couldn't go along with that anymore. So we've sort of both, I think, tried to do things despite that and just got on with it. And so we've got a great festival come in, and that's all about the culture and creative industries. And I would say as well, it's about the biggest. So we've got the Playhouse, we've got the Henry Moore Institute and the Art Gallery, we've got Northern Ballet and Opera North, these amazing world-class cultural institutions. But the smallest ones are so important as well, from the little, charity that does artwork for helping people with the mental health issues in the inner east area of our city. It's Inkwell, it's called. It's about how you have a vision for culture and creativity that's for everybody, and I think that's the power and I like to say the DNA of a city.
And so I'm very conscious of your time, and I won't let you go on time. And just find there's lots of stuff that I think we could have explored there around, the enterprise zone and the city as well, what you've done in housing, and again lessons for the city, which are your city for ours. But I just want to maybe just find a very quick question around sort of processy question. Not as exciting as the previous one, but the region, the city region, has just had a newly elected mayor, again, following what has happened in other parts of the north of England, elsewhere in the country as well. How do you see that helping, benefiting the city in terms of establishing the city region's brand and also helping to grow its economy?
Yeah, Tracy Brabin is our new mayor, and we're delighted. We've got the first female Metro mayor in the country, which is long overdue and fantastic. And she's a very energetic, very positive individual who's got a vision which is very much fitting with ours about the green economy, about the creative and cultural sector, which is her background, and you know, a real issue about transport improvement, which is probably our Achilles heel and the one that we need to get better at. And you know, so we want to get more control of bus, you know, the bus franchises and the way that buses run in our city, either from taking on more control or working better with the bus companies. We want the high-speed rail link, we want better rail services. And I think the other thing that Tracy and the mayoralty will do is get power pulled down from London to the local area, and also connect us up better with our region, and make sure that, you know, other parts of the region are doing as well as Leeds or better. So that there's great opportunity there. We're really looking forward to working with Tracy, and we've got off to a flying start with her. It's a very strong partnership.
So for Tom, that's fascinating, and I'd say lots of commonality with Belfast, lots of lessons for Belfast, and that's what we'd hope to explore in the time that we have with you. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks for taking the time out of what I know is a very busy schedule. Wish you all the very best in your meeting with government officials now, and every success in securing those jobs. And thank you for coming along this morning. There's great interest from members, and we wish you and the team in Leeds all the very best in the time ahead as you emerge from the pandemic and towards recovery. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, Simon, and yeah, a great shout out to everybody in Belfast, and we're really keen to continue our collaboration through the core cities that we do really strongly with all the main cities in the UK. Thank you, and take care.
So Tom, one of the things that Tom talked about was Leeds's plans to vision, I suppose, to transform into a Northern European, not just it is a Northern English city, but to be a Northern European city. And we are joined this morning, very, very fortunate to be joined this morning by a key figure, a real leading individual in probably the epitome of not just good Northern European cities, but good cities globally. And that's Anne Scarborough, who is the CEO at Copenhagen's City and Port Authority, which is a unique model for the development of that excellent city. Those of you who have visited will know just how wonderful it is. So Anne, I'm going to hand over to you to tell us a little bit more about your organisation and how you've helped to transform Copenhagen.
Thank you, Simon. And I'm sorry to say I haven't been to Belfast. I've been to Leeds twice, actually, maybe 3 times, but not to Belfast. So I would love to go. And now soon Corona is hopefully done, and then we can still do city breaks, do it again. So I'm looking forward to that. I have some slides which I will share with you. Hope this will work. Just a second. Is this working?
It is. It's on screen. If you want to put it onto the presentation mode, maybe.
Yes.
There it is. Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So just a few word about our company, and I'll try to slip through these slides a bit fast so we can have some questions for me. But the core story about us is that we are a publicly owned company owned by local authorities, the city of Copenhagen, but also by the Ministry of Transport, so national level. And the story about that is that in the 90s, there was a huge debate about the city of Copenhagen and the fact that we were a very rundown industrial city, really didn't click into the new knowledge economy of Europe. So there was a big agreement, political agreement between national government and local government saying we need new funds to regenerate a lot of the old industrial sites in Copenhagen. And we also need finances in order to do some of the huge investments in new infrastructure that we can see is needed. And also new plots, higher quality of life in Copenhagen is needed. So although that local authorities in Denmark get a lot of tax revenue, that's very different from the model you have in Northern Ireland and in England and Scotland, because in general, we have a high tax level, and then actually national government get a bit of it, but the rest of it goes to local government. So local government in Denmark actually have quite a lot of tax funds to do what they need to do, but they are also obliged to do kindergartens, schools, and everything. Most of that is public in Denmark, and it's the local authorities which are in charge of this. So what was realized was a need for having even more funds to do what you wanted to do with the capital of Denmark, Copenhagen, in order to ensure both a higher quality of life, but also actually the new jobs that you could see were coming in. So our publicly owned company was created then. A part of it is actually the old harbor company of Copenhagen, Copenhagen Port. And some of the areas we work with is the former harbor areas. The ambition we have at the moment is then to ensure that the development we do is to capture a lot of the land value, use that to finance public infrastructure, and I'll return to some of what that is. But do it in a sustainable manner. That has been the core of our work from the beginning in the 90s. But actually at the moment, of course, we renew and revisit what sustainability is today for Copenhagen and Copenhageners. But this is our ambition, to work together with the people of Copenhagen to create healthy, sustainable, cohesive and high quality urban districts with room for communities, urban life and a vibrant waterfront. I very much agree with the point from Tom saying that big cultural institution is of course important, ballet, opera and whatever, but there's a high quality level of cultural institutions, but then the local cultural institution is very much important for urban life today, because people live in the city, and that is what has happened in Copenhagen, and I'll return to that. So what we do, as you can hear, is that we actually sell publicly owned land and pay for green infrastructure. And what we also do is, in the areas we develop all the sites. One example you see here, bicycle lanes, which we have a lot of in Copenhagen, and a lot of the common different plots and high quality urban spaces. And we do it in a way where our focus, what we finance, is especially sustainable infrastructure and sustainable projects. We are owned at the moment by the city of Copenhagen, 95%, and the national government. This has differed a bit. I think we'll return to a more 50-50 balance in ownership. We have some different subsidiaries, and one of them is still the port, which we own together with the city of Malmö, which is in Sweden, as you probably know. So that's one of the corporations we have in order to ensure that there's a publicly owned port on both sides of the Øresund. At the moment, what you'll find is that we have, since we were formed in the way we're formed now as a company, 2007, we have financed about 20 billion Danish kroner of sustainable infrastructure. What is that in pound? I guess it's around 3 billion pounds of infrastructure, I guess. And a lot of it is the new metro lines in Copenhagen. But at the moment, we also will start financing new solutions for a new container terminal built in a sustainable manner. So that is in general what we finance. So huge infrastructural investments in order to regenerate the city. This has made space for nearly 20,000 new homes at the moment, and a lot of new workplaces. And then that's not industrial workplaces. That is really huge companies within the knowledge sector. We have a lot of especially engineering companies. They're very strong, the Danish companies within that sector. But also you will find lawyers, architects, and some tech companies as well, also within fintech. 20% of these dwellings will be social housing, because we have a very strong focus on ensuring social sustainability at the same time as we do the redevelopment. These are the areas we redevelop. A lot of them, as you can see, is former harbor sites, and the big development area at the moment will be the northern harbor area. We're more or less done in this big field and in the south part of the city. This area, Prøvestenen, will still be an industrial port, but the rest of the inner city is more or less redeveloped. So the northern harbor area is where we work at the moment. Of course, this is realistic also because there's a quite strong growth in population in Copenhagen. There's been a yearly increase during the past many years. In some years we've had 10,000 new citizens just in the city of Copenhagen. And the city of Copenhagen, actually, the city border is very narrow. We're a bit like Amsterdam. So in the greater Copenhagen area, there's also a need for new housing projects, but there's been a strong growth, especially in the city of Copenhagen, and still a strong need for new housing developments. At the same time, we've actually been quite good at ensuring this in a sustainable manner, due to the fact that we have done huge investment in public transport, the metro lines we have financed, but also huge investments in utilities, district heating projects, and so forth. So a huge drop in the CO2 emissions as well when we have done this redevelopment. And that's, of course, some of the numbers and figures we're very proud of. The way we work is that we start actually any development where we want to capture the value of the land with having a public dialogue about what are the needs of the local area. Based on that, we do a competition for a master plan, and then we go into a dialogue with the city of Copenhagen and the planning authorities on developing a master plan, a district plan for the area. And then after that, we go on to selling some of the plots. Just some examples from the new areas. This is the beginning of the development of the northern harbor area. This was in 2013, a few years after the period where we started the competitions and the new district planning of this area. As you can see, I guess a very traditional Northern European industrial harbor area where we had some historic buildings, but also a lot of silos which has been used for corn and stuff like that. Some of this plots you can see over here was done in the beginning of the 90s, early stuff in order to do regeneration, but was really not part of a plan for the whole area, and that is what we have done now. So now in the year of 2021, this is how it looks like in the same area. So redevelopment has happened very fast, and that is of course also due to the numbers and figures you saw on the former slide, that there's a strong growth in population in Copenhagen. But I believe one of the reasons that we have a strong growth is the fact that Tom also touched upon the needs, finding out what are the redevelopment we would like to have in Copenhagen. As you can see, we don't really do high-rise. We try to redevelop areas like this so they look like Copenhagen. So there's a lot of bricks. We like bricks. We have a lot of clay in this country. So we find a lot of quite traditional blocks with bricks, and where you have more private side inside, but also big public areas. What you see here is the only high-rise buildings you'll find is actually the former silos, which has been redeveloped for housing and offices. So they're sort of landmarks still, so people know how to find their way, because the silos on the port areas has been, you know, a landmark on how to find your way in the city. And this is the numbers in this area now. So within 5 years, we now have 3,000 new inhabitants in this area. Here you can see the same area from the waterfront, and we spend a lot of time looking into the specific design of the harbourfront in order to ensure that the harbourfront is one of the huge attractions and values we have in Copenhagen, and changing this industrial harbour into a more recreational harbour. And the blue part of the central blue part of Copenhagen, we see it as a part of a park now. So the harbour is twice the size of Central Park in New York, and should be looked upon as such. So at the moment you can swim in the harbour in Copenhagen. That has taken a lot of investments in clearing up the harbour, but also in from the utility company, in order to ensure that we don't have any problems from that aspect in the harbour. And now we have 11 kilometers of recreational waterfront area. We invest in harbour baths and places like you see here, where you can swim in the summer, but you know, as Danes, Vikings, we also swim in the winter. It's good for you, good for your health. And we have done a lot of local small squares and urban spaces in both the Northern Harbour area, but also in the other areas we work on. This is just an overview of on the places you can swim in the harbour at the moment. But people swim everywhere anyway. We are also looking into how we ensure that that you actually have new urban districts you can relate to. And that's partly a question about the architecture, as I mentioned before, that Copenhageners feel that they can, the identity of Copenhagen is reflected in the new districts, but also ensuring that you have local projects with cultural hubs, you can call them. So some of the former harbour buildings, industrial buildings are regenerated into places like the one you can see down here. It's what you call the tunnel factory. It was actually used for building the tunnel elements for the link between Denmark and Sweden from Copenhagen to Malmö. That's where you, maybe if you've seen the bridge, if you know that, the Danish-Swedish crime fiction series, that was about that. And the bridge was built within this building, and now we're turning it into to a cultural hub where you can have a lot of different activities, food, have places, a bit more rustic place for bands to play and stuff like that. And we do that in partnership with private companies, because we don't know a lot about that, but we have the building, and that's really at the core of our model, to do partnerships in order to achieve some of the goals we have. And this is just a funny illustration about the change that has happened in Copenhagen. The sign says fishing is forbidden, and a warning: fish in the harbour can be very polluted. And you can see it's a bit icy on that day in the harbour. This was the case in the 80s, in the beginning of the 90s. So it's a quite new sign, to my opinion. And this is really not the case today. So this has been a huge change in the understanding of what the harbour is. So at the moment, our challenge is actually that the young people and children of Copenhagen, they don't know the harbour is dangerous, because for them it has always been a swimming zone and not an industrial harbour. So just a bit of this is from the 80s and digging into where we are at the moment. And in the summer of 2018, CNN announced Copenhagen as the best city to swim in the world. And then this is what it was like in the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. So a quite huge change. And just to sum up some illustrations of some of the building, the silos we have changed from a concrete building silo into a new industrial design, and some illustrations of this tunnel factory with the cultural facilities, and just brief touch upon one of the new projects we're looking into. Copenhagen is a harbor city, and one of the challenges we are looking into at the moment is the fact that we have a sea level rise situation. We are not Venice, but sometimes we forget that we are a bit like Amsterdam, and we don't have all the dikes they have in the Netherlands. So at the moment, we're looking into doing a new island. We are very good at building harbors. So at the moment, we're looking into the possibility of doing a new island in Copenhagen, as you see here, called Nordhavn. And this island are supposed to work as part of a storm flood protection system, where we'll also place a sort of port here in order to protect the central part of the city, and then also do new recreational facilities, and then ensure that we also for the future will have land for the coming Copenhageners. So we look forward to this, and Parliament agreed upon this 2 weeks ago. So we'll start digging next winter. So thank you very much. And I hope that was some illustrations of the work in Copenhagen.
And that was brilliant. I can feel a Belfast Chamber field trip, a work study to Copenhagen.
Please do.
And before I maybe ask you some questions, I'm going to go to Chris Phillips again from Harsh McDowell, just to get his thoughts on what he's heard so far, both from Tom and from Anne. I was going to ask you about lessons learned, but maybe we should be arranging for the two of us to go down for a dip in Belfast Harbour at lunchtime. Chris, I'm not sure if we're quite ready for that in the city or not, and maybe not today.
Perhaps not. It's looking a bit grey.
Maybe we wait until the weather improves. But I mean, what Anne has and her team have done in Copenhagen is impressive. Leeds is, as I said before, on that regeneration journey too, comparable in many ways to Belfast. So there must be a lot of lessons there that you've picked up on as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I recall Joe O'Neill from Belfast Harbour talking about how they look to other cities for inspiration, and having seen Anne's presentation in Copenhagen, it's easy to see why Copenhagen was near the top of their list for that. I was struck by the similarities that Copenhagen and Leeds have with Belfast, particularly in Copenhagen. Anne mentioned in the 90s it was an industrial city, it was a harbour city, and then Tom's presentation on Leeds talked about the emerging tech sector there, and one of the things that struck me about Tom's and Anne's presentations was Tom mentioned the need to strike balance between the economy and the environment. And Anne as well talked about the need for recreational and public space is as important as the buildings themselves. We know the ambition to get more people living in the centre of Belfast, and certainly Copenhagen are a great example of that. I think the key will be those recreational spaces, the public spaces, areas where people can bring their families and really enjoy living there as well as working in the city.
Thanks, Chris. I think that's maybe a good place to start on. You know, when you look at the blue urban areas, that blue infrastructure that your organisation has helped to develop in Copenhagen, it is right in the heart of the city. It's helped to, it has a lot of development around it. It looks on the face of it just as a nice thing to do. And you mentioned, how polluted the harbour was, and so it's environmentally a good thing to do. It's aesthetically and architecturally quite pleasing on the eye. But to what extent is that also driving the desire of people to come and live and work and spend their time in Copenhagen, and particularly around the port area?
It does definitely. I mean, for me as a Copenhagener, in the 90s, if you wanted to go to swim in the summer, you would drive out of the city to some of the beaches north or south of Copenhagen. So the fact that suddenly, for a lot of the recreational interest you have as a young person or a family, you don't need to drive out of the city. You can actually swim in the city. We have parks, and just that has definitely changed the way you look upon the city. But the problem is, I guess, at the moment that the success has been so big, so young people, they're partying along the harbor at the moment. So if you tap into the news in Copenhagen at the moment, that will be some of the challenges, because it has been such a success with the cafes along the port, and so at the moment there's a lot of parties going on as well. But in general, it has really changed the view of the city. So of course, in some of the areas, I didn't get into that, but in the Northern Harbour area and also in the Southern Harbour area, we are doing canals as part of the urban regeneration, because partly the historic part of Copenhagen has canals, and it's very much inspired by Amsterdam. It was built 400 years ago. So we are doing canals when we do the regeneration, because the blue part of the city is such a strong part of our identity. But on the other hand, of course, it raises land value and the quality of life in these new areas.
Something that Tom said as well earlier was about, the city being authentic and true to its character, and you talked about that as well. That the buildings that the Copenhagen Port and Harbour Authority has developed look like Copenhagen. You talked about it, not high rise, which is sort of consistent with the way the city looks and has developed historically, and lots of open public space. So we talked about blue infrastructure, but on the green side as well, that's something that you have sacrificed development space to get public space in, again, because of that. That's not just, again, a nice place to live and work in, but it raises the it's in keeping with the character of the city. So that's a kind of an important principle that you have developed. And is that something that is very, with the ownership of the company being publicly owned, is that something that has driven into what you do?
Well, partly, but I guess it also reflects some of our the critique that was of some of the early redevelopment projects in Copenhagen. So the area of Ørsted, which is not along the harbour side, but is had a lot of critique about not really, people couldn't relate to that district. So what we see is that is reflected in the price level of housing. That's good for some. It's more cheap. But on the other hand, for us and for the city, it's really not a good story. So the reason that we're very precise from that is partly the planning authorities agree, but on the other hand, we also see it reflected in the price level. So high quality is actually in the interest of us, also when it comes to ensuring a good revenue. And we know that there's sort of a limit for, high-rise is expensive to do in Denmark anyway. I don't know, but it's quite expensive to do. So there's sort of also a place where the higher density and the price you get for the land and the price of the different dwellings will tip. So as we see it, the density you can get and still also the quality of the urban spaces, what you see in the more classical European city with blocks, Barcelona is one of the densest cities in the world. But when you see it, you say, it's not that dense. But it is actually quite dense. They have blocks of, I get them 8 or 9 stories. In Copenhagen, we are more like a 5 or 6 story blocks city. But anyway, it is, we can find space for a lot of Copenhageners. And by still doing what we have done for 400 years. And I think we are going a bit back in time and saying, okay, what have we learned and what works in Copenhagen? And it seems as if Copenhagen is like that. And the Northern Harbour district at the moment is the most expensive district in Copenhagen.
I think just conscious of everybody's time, and you know, there's a lot of stuff again we could go through in this, but you know, the fact that you talk about the value and raising value, because that's, you need to do that. You need to obviously more than cover costs, because the model that you operate in is a circular model where, as you explained. So, you know, that's the way company is set up. That's the way you've operated. That has been a very successful model. On the one hand, you know, that might seem, we're less used to that in this part of the world as a model for driving regeneration, but it seems to me, if we go and say that, almost a best of both worlds type of situation, where you have a publicly owned company which injects that sort of, you know, development must look like Copenhagen. It has to be sustainable, and sustainability is at the heart of it. But it's underpinned by strong commercial principles where you've got to make a profit, you've got to drive value up, because that's what allows the investment into kindergarten, schools, and public transport to the degree that you have. So this model is, it's not unique, totally unique. There are other similar models, but you were one of the first to do this, and it seems to work really, really well. And there's a question of why it hasn't been done everywhere, but also why it has been so successful in Copenhagen.
I guess in other cities, you won't necessarily find that the land has been publicly owned. So it starts off with the fact that a lot of the harbor sites and a lot of the areas we have developed was publicly owned. And in other cities, you'll find that it's not publicly owned. And then it's difficult to start off with this model because we really don't buy new land. So we redevelop land which were in our ownership from the beginning. And I think that's, of course, one of the key issues from starting off. But you'll find the same model in Hafen City in Hamburg, where it has been a publicly owned harbor company doing all the redevelopments. And in Germany in general, they use this model a lot. You won't find it in Norway. I grew up in Norway, and you won't find it there. But they have big issues with rising prices on housing, and they really haven't. They're more liberal than we are in Denmark, although we wouldn't believe it. But they are, when it comes to this, not when it comes to alcohol.
Very good. And I think it's interesting that you don't buy land, you said, but you make new land, and some really hugely ambitious projects. I mean, I thought some of the iconic buildings that you've built in the waterfront are fascinating, but to build new districts, but then to reclaim land to build entire new districts is hugely ambitious, and must be a real challenge, but obviously something that you're very much up for.
Yeah, but again, in Copenhagen, we have reclaimed land for 400 years. Starting off with ensuring land for the royal family, then for the Navy, and then for industrial areas, and now for ensuring new urban districts. And in that way, we still have it as publicly owned land, and that's a good idea.
Thank you very much for all of that, mate. There are lots and lots of other questions that we could delve into, but we really thank you for your time and for putting the effort into the presentation and to giving in this morning, and for taking those questions. Really appreciate that. Thank you, and wish you and the team in Copenhagen all the very best, and look forward to getting back there again very soon.
And you too in Belfast. And please visit us, and we'd like to visit you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Anne. Just finally, Chris, then, just last word to you again. You know, huge similarities, I think, with Copenhagen as well, are around the reclamation of land. Belfast City, which a lot of our port in that area is reclaimed as well. But you know, really fascinating ambition and scale of ambition, and nothing seems to hold them back, and they're very experienced in doing this. Again, it's something for us to be mindful of.
Yes, absolutely. I think what comes to mind is particularly the collaborations between Belfast Harbour and Titanic Quarter, which have seen a vast amount of development, as everyone will know, in the last 10 to 15 years, and future development to come, which all looks very promising. I think James Ayer's presentation focusing on Olympic House and the other projects that are going on around there. So it's all very positive. I think one thing that Tom said was that success comes on the back of a reputation for delivery, and certainly the projects that have been delivered in Belfast in the past are setting us up well for good success in the future.
Thank you, Chris. And that just brings us to the end of not just today's event, but this series of Re-Energizing Belfast and the 4 events that we've had. And hopefully you can see the thread that has connected all of the topics and discussions that we've had and the presentations that we've had over the series. I want to thank all of our contributors. I want to particularly thank Anne and Tom for their time today. I think they were absolutely excellent. I think that we've been very fortunate throughout the series and having some excellent presentations. So thank you to everybody. Can I thank Carson McDowell again for their support in helping to make this series possible. So thank you to Chris and to Dawson and Emma and the entire team at Carson McDowell. Thank you for collaborating with Belfast Chamber on what I think has been a hugely successful series. And I thank Neil and Catherine at the events for making all of them possible. And finally, thank everybody for their attendance, and we hope that you enjoy them. The video for this one will be available very soon and online on our YouTube channel. If you want to share the Copenhagen and Leeds stories with anybody, please feel free to do so. So thank you again, everybody. Take care, have a good weekend, and look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you.